Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive with us. Um, today we are exploring the impact of childhood trauma.
Ooh.
It can have like a ripple effect across a person's life.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're working with some excerpts from an article,
Okay.
and it really digs into the long-term effects. And
Yeah.
what I thought was really fascinating is how we can build resilience
Right.
even after these difficult experiences.
Yeah. It's a tough subject, but it's
Yeah,
also a really important one.
absolutely.
And you're right, there is a lot of hope
Hmm.
that is woven into this research.
Yeah, and one line that really stuck with me
Okay.
from this article is this quote: "Childhood trauma isn't something you just get over as you grow up. It becomes a part of who you are, like a scar."
Mm.
It really makes you think
Yeah.
about how these experiences shape us even years later.
Yeah. It's so powerful.
Yeah.
It's such a powerful image.
Mm-hmm.
And it reminds us that healing isn't about erasing the past, but about, learning to live with and integrate those experiences into our lives.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's unpack this a bit.
Okay.
The article talks about different kinds of trauma: physical and emotional abuse, neglect, witnessing violence, and even just being exposed to distressing events.
Right. And sometimes it's not just one single event,
Right.
but a series of these difficult experiences that create what's called complex trauma.
Okay.
So imagine being constantly on high alert,
Okay.
like a car with a broken alarm system that keeps going off. That's kind of what it's like for a child experiencing ongoing trauma.
Wow.
Their stress response system gets stuck in overdrive.
Yeah, that really hits home.
Yeah.
It helps me understand
Yeah.
why someone who's experienced trauma
Right.
might be extra sensitive to stress or have trouble calming down.
Yeah.
It's like their internal alarm bell is always ringing.
Exactly. And this chronic state of stress
Yeah.
can actually change the way the brain develops. So think of the brain as a house under construction.
Okay.
Trauma can disrupt the wiring,
Right.
making it harder for certain rooms or brain regions to function properly.
So it's not just about feelings.
Right.
There's
Well,
real physical impact happening in the brain.
yes, that's right. Wow. 3 key areas are particularly vulnerable: the hippocampus, the amygdala, and the prefrontal cortex.
Okay, those sound familiar.
Yeah.
But refresh my memory.
Of course.
Like, what do those parts of the brain do again?
Well, the hippocampus is like the brain's librarian.
Okay.
It helps us file away memories and learn new things.
Right.
But when trauma disrupts this area, it can be harder to concentrate, remember things,
Right.
and learn from experiences.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
What about the amygdala?
So that's our emotional control center,
Okay.
responsible for processing feelings like fear and anxiety.
Right.
Trauma can make the amygdala overly sensitive,
Okay.
leading to these intense emotional reactions, even in situations that wouldn't normally be upsetting.
Right.
It's like the emotional volume control is stuck on high.
So it's not that they're being dramatic.
Right.
Their brain is actually processing emotions differently because of the trauma.
Exactly.
Well,
And then there's the prefrontal cortex.
okay.
This is the executive suite of the brain,
Mm-hmm.
responsible for things like planning, decision-making,
Yeah.
and impulse control.
Right.
So when this area is affected by trauma,
Yeah.
it can lead to difficulties with focusing, thinking clearly,
Right.
and making healthy choices.
So trauma essentially hijacks the brain's memory and emotional centers, making it harder to learn, regulate emotions,
Yeah.
and make sound decisions.
You got it.
Wow.
That's a great way to put it.
Okay.
It's not that these individuals are incapable.
Right.
It's that their brains have been wired differently due to traumatic experiences.
Right. And the article mentions adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs.
Yes.
Seems like there's a lot of research
There is.
showing a link between ACEs and health problems later in life.
Absolutely. So ACEs encompass a range of difficult experiences.
Okay.
From abuse and neglect to witnessing violence
Mhm.
or having a parent with mental health or substance abuse issues.
Right.
The higher someone's ACD score,
Okay.
the greater their risk for a whole host of physical and mental health challenges as adults.
So it's not just about immediate harm.
Right.
The effects of trauma can really linger.
Absolutely. But here's a crucial point.
Okay.
ACEs don't determine someone's destiny.
Okay.
They increase risk, but they don't guarantee negative outcomes.
But that's reassuring.
Yeah.
There's still room for hope and healing.
Definitely. And that's where understanding the emotional and behavioral manifestations of trauma comes in.
Okay.
It helps us recognize when someone might be struggling with the legacy of these early experiences.
Right. The article mentions attachment difficulties, problems with self-regulation,
Right.
and strained social relationships as some common after effects of trauma.
Right. Think about it. If a child's early relationships were marked by inconsistency, neglect, or even abuse, they may develop insecure attachment styles.
Right.
They might be overly clingy, or on the flip side, extremely withdrawn and avoidant in relationships.
So these early patterns of relating to others can really cast a long shadow, impacting how we connect with people throughout our lives.
Exactly.
It's not about being difficult.
Right.
It's about responding based on what they've learned about trust and safety.
That's a really insightful point.
Yeah.
And then there's the issue of self-regulation.
Right.
Trauma can make it hard to manage emotions, control impulses, and soothe oneself.
The article specifically mentions two types of attachment difficulties: avoidant and disorganized.
Oh, yeah.
Could you elaborate on those a bit more?
Sure. So individuals with an avoidant attachment style often shy away from closeness and intimacy, preferring independence and emotional distance. It's as if they've learned that relying on others is risky or disappointing.
Right.
Disorganized attachment, on the other hand, is characterized by a mix of approach and avoidance behaviors. These individuals may desperately crave connection, but also fear getting hurt.
Right.
Leading to a push-pull dynamic in their relationship.
That makes sense. It's like they haven't learned a consistent way of navigating relationships. So they're caught between wanting connection and fearing the potential pain that comes with it.
Precisely. And this difficulty regulating emotions can manifest in many ways. Angry outbursts, impulsive behaviors, difficulty concentrating, even physical symptoms like headaches or stomach aches.
So it's not always obvious that these behaviors are rooted in trauma. It might be easy to misinterpret them as simply being bad or difficult.
Exactly. That's why understanding the impact of trauma is so crucial. It allows us to look beyond the surface behaviors and see the underlying pain and vulnerability.
The article also uses a really interesting phrase to describe the impact of complex trauma: a fragmented landscape representing childhood. What does that mean to you?
To me, it speaks to a sense of disruption and disconnection. It's like the different pieces of childhood, memories, emotions, relationships, haven't been woven together into a cohesive whole.
So it's not just about specific events. It's about how those events disrupt the overall sense of self and continuity.
Exactly. And this fragmentation can impact every area of development.
Wow.
Cognitive, social, emotional, even physical.
It paints a pretty sobering picture.
Yeah.
But the article doesn't end there, right?
Yeah, no, it doesn't.
It moves on to talk about resilience. There's hope even after experiencing such difficult things.
Absolutely. Resilience is the ability to bounce back from adversity, to adapt and thrive even in the face of challenges. And the good news is resilience is not some fixed trait. It's a set of skills and strategies that can be learned and strengthened over time.
That's such an important message.
Yeah.
So what are some of the ways we can help foster resilience in children who've experienced trauma?
Well, first and foremost, it's about creating safe and supportive environments. That means having caring and consistent adults in their lives who can provide a sense of security, stability, and unconditional love.
That sounds pretty basic.
Yeah.
But I imagine it can be life-changing for a child who's experienced trauma.
Absolutely. It lays the foundation for healing and growth.
Yeah.
And beyond that, there are specific therapeutic interventions that can help children process their trauma, develop coping mechanisms, and build resilience.
The article mentions things like trauma-focused therapy and the importance of teaching coping strategies like mindfulness techniques or breathing exercises.
Yeah, those are all valuable tools. Trauma-focused therapy helps children understand and manage their emotional and behavioral responses to trauma, and coping strategies give them concrete ways to regulate their emotions and navigate stressful situations.
So it's about equipping them with both internal and external resources to manage the challenges they face.
Exactly. And here's another key point. Resilience isn't something you either have or don't have. The article specifically states, resilience is not something that children either have or don't have. It involves behaviors, thoughts, and actions that can be learned and developed in anyone.
That's incredibly powerful.
It is.
It means that every child has the potential to overcome adversity and thrive. It's not about erasing the trauma, but about learning to live with it in a way that allows them to lead full and meaningful lives.
Exactly. And that leads us to a crucial shift in perspective, the concept of trauma-informed care.
That sounds interesting.
Yeah.
What exactly does that mean?
Well, it's about moving away from asking what's wrong with you.
Okay.
To what happened to you.
That's such a profound reframing.
Yeah, it is.
Instead of seeing challenging behaviors as bad or defiant, we start to understand them as adaptations to trauma.
Precisely. Trauma-informed care recognizes the pervasive impact of trauma and seeks to create systems and services that are sensitive to the needs of survivors.
This seems like a really important concept.
It is.
We should definitely dive deeper into this after
definitely.
a quick break. We'll be right back. So before the break, we were talking about this idea of trauma-informed care.
Yes.
It sounds like a pretty big shift in how we think about and respond to people who've experienced trauma.
It really is. It's about recognizing that trauma can affect people in these profound ways and that our responses need to be grounded in understanding and compassion.
The article mentions some key principles of trauma-informed care.
Yes.
Safety, trust, collaboration, empowerment, and a strengths-based approach.
Right.
Let's unpack those a bit. What does it actually look like to put those principles into practice?
Well, it starts with creating environments where people feel physically and emotionally safe.
Okay.
This means being aware of potential triggers, respecting boundaries, and avoiding any practices that could re-traumatize someone.
Okay.
For instance, a traditional talk therapy setting, with its emphasis on revisiting past trauma in detail, might not feel safe for someone who's still struggling to regulate their emotions.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
It's like saying, okay, we're going to help you heal.
Right.
But then putting them in an environment that actually feels threatening or overwhelming.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's about meeting people where they are.
Right.
And recognizing that healing is a process that unfolds at its own pace.
And what about trust? If someone's been betrayed or let down in the past, especially by people who are supposed to care for them.
Yeah.
I imagine building trust is crucial.
It's absolutely essential.
Yeah.
Trauma-informed care emphasizes transparency, consistency, and follow-through. It's about saying what you mean, meaning what you say, and doing what you say you'll do.
So it's about building a relationship where actions match words.
Exactly.
And where the person feels like their voice is heard and respected.
Right. And that leads to the principle of collaboration.
Okay.
Trauma-informed care isn't about a top-down, expert knows best approach.
Right.
It's about working in partnership with the individual, recognizing their expertise in their own experience, and involving them in every step of the healing process.
I like that.
Yeah.
It's about empowering people to take ownership of their own healing journey.
Exactly. And a strengths-based approach is also key.
Okay.
Instead of just focusing on the problems or symptoms, trauma-informed care looks for and builds upon the individual's strengths, resilience, and coping mechanisms.
So it's about saying, hey, look at all the amazing things you've overcome.
Yes.
Look at all the inner resources you have.
Exactly.
Rather than just focusing on what's wrong or broken.
Right. It's about recognizing that even in the face of adversity, there are sparks of hope and potential.
That's a really powerful shift in perspective.
It is.
So how do these principles actually play out in terms of specific therapeutic approaches? The article mentions play therapy and art therapy as being particularly helpful for children.
Yeah, those can be incredibly effective modalities.
Okay.
For working with children who've experienced trauma, play therapy allows children to express themselves and process their experiences through play, which can feel less threatening than direct verbal communication.
I can see how that would be especially helpful for younger children who might not have the words to describe what they've been through.
Right.
Or who might feel overwhelmed by talking about it directly.
Exactly. Play provides a safe space for children to act out their feelings, experiment with different roles, and work through traumatic memories in a way that feels natural and engaging.
And what about art therapy? How does that help with trauma healing?
Art therapy provides another nonverbal avenue for expression and processing.
Okay.
It allows children to communicate their experiences and emotions through creative mediums like drawing, painting, sculpting, or even music.
So it's not about creating a masterpiece.
Right.
It's about using art as a tool for healing and self-discovery.
Precisely, art provides a tangible way to externalize emotions, make sense of experiences, and communicate things that might be difficult to put into words.
The article mentions the importance of safe and supportive environments for healing to occur.
Yes.
But creating those environments isn't always easy.
Right.
Especially if the trauma happened within the family or in other settings that should have been safe.
That's a really important point.
Yeah.
We can't just assume that every child has access to those nurturing and supportive relationships.
So where do we start?
Well,
how do we create those safe spaces?
Yeah.
Especially for kids who might not have them at home.
It takes a multifaceted approach.
Okay.
We need to think about the individual, the family, and the broader community at the individual level.
Right.
Therapeutic interventions like trauma-informed therapy can provide a safe and supportive space for processing and healing.
Okay.
But we also need to work with families to help them understand the impact of trauma, develop healthier communication patterns, and create a more nurturing home environment.
And it sounds like we need to go beyond the family as well.
Yes, we do.
Schools, healthcare settings, community organizations, all of these systems play a role in either supporting or hindering a child's healing journey.
Absolutely. That's where the idea of trauma-informed systems comes in. It's about recognizing the prevalence of trauma and creating policies, practices, and environments that are sensitive to the needs of survivors.
So it's not just about having a few well-meaning individuals.
Yeah.
It's about creating a culture of trauma awareness and responsiveness.
Yes.
Across all of these different systems.
Exactly. And that means training teachers,
Right.
healthcare providers, social workers, law enforcement officers,
Wow.
anyone who interacts with children
Right.
to understand how trauma manifests,
Right.
how to respond in a way that minimizes re-traumatization, and how to create spaces where children feel safe, heard, and supported.
It sounds like a big undertaking.
It is.
But also incredibly important.
Absolutely.
It's about shifting from a reactive approach, where we're just trying to manage problem behaviors, to a proactive approach that focuses on prevention, early intervention, and creating a world where fewer children experience trauma in the first place.
That's a powerful way to put it. And while it might seem daunting, there are a lot of inspiring examples of communities and organizations that are already embracing trauma-informed approaches and seeing positive results.
That's encouraging to hear.
Yeah, it is.
It sounds like there's a lot of work to be done, but also a lot of hope for creating a more trauma-sensitive world.
Definitely. And as we move towards the final part of our deep dive, it's important to remember that each of us can play a role in this shift. We can educate ourselves about trauma, challenge stigma, advocate for trauma-informed policies, and simply treat each other with more compassion and understanding.
Those are great reminders. So let's take a moment to reflect on all we've discussed so far.
Okay.
When we return, we'll explore what this all means for us, for our listeners, and for the world around us.
Sounds good.
Wow, we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive.
We have.
We've gone from the science of how trauma affects the brain to the ways that it shows up in our emotions and relationships and behaviors. And we've talked about how resilience can be fostered. And how trauma-informed approaches can create a foundation for healing.
Yeah, it's been a journey through some heavy material, but ultimately, I think it's a message of hope. Because what we're really talking about is the incredible capacity of the human spirit to adapt and heal and grow, even in the face of adversity.
It's a beautiful way to frame it. So as we wrap up, I keep coming back to this idea, like, what does it all mean for us, for our listeners? How do we take all this knowledge and turn it into something meaningful, something that makes a difference in the world?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And I don't think there's one simple answer. But I think it starts with awareness. Simply understanding the impact of trauma, how it shapes us, how it shows up, how it can be healed. That's a powerful first step.
It's like putting on a new pair of glasses. You suddenly see things differently. Behaviors that might have seemed confusing or frustrating before now start to make sense when you understand the lens of trauma.
Exactly. And that understanding can lead to compassion, not just for others, but for ourselves. We start to recognize that we're all carrying our own invisible wounds, our own stories of resilience and struggle.
So awareness is the first step. What comes next?
Well, I think action follows awareness. Once we understand the impact of trauma, we can start to make different choices in our own lives, in our families, in our communities.
What kinds of choices?
Yeah.
Give us some concrete examples.
Well, it could be as simple as choosing to respond to someone's anger with curiosity rather than judgment.
Okay.
Or it could be advocating for trauma-informed practices in our schools, workplaces, or healthcare settings. It could even mean seeking out our own healing journeys if we've experienced trauma ourselves.
Those are all great examples.
Yeah.
And it strikes me that even small actions can ripple outward.
They do.
And create positive change.
Absolutely. Think about it.
Yeah.
Every time we choose empathy over judgment, every time we create a safe space for someone to share their story, every time we advocate for policies that support healing and resilience, we're contributing to a more trauma-sensitive world.
And that's a world where more children can thrive.
Exactly.
Where healing is possible.
Yes.
And where the cycle of trauma can be broken.
That's the vision. Yeah. And while we may not see the results of our efforts immediately, we can trust that those seeds of compassion and understanding are taking root and will eventually blossom.
It's like the quote from the article.
Yeah.
Resilience is not something that children either have or don't have. It involves behaviors, thoughts, and actions that can be learned and developed in anyone. It's a reminder that change is possible, that healing is possible, and that each of us has a role to play in creating a more hopeful future.
Beautifully said. And on that note, I think it's time to wrap up our deep dive.
Well, thank you for taking us on this journey.
Yeah.
With such insight and compassion.
It's been my pleasure. And to our listeners, keep diving deep. Keep questioning, keep learning, and keep believing in the power of healing and transformation.
Until next time, take care.